put a smile on your face when you're moving from place to place. Good morning, good morning, morning, good morning, morning.
Good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. You see, I tell you,
this is the morning show. This is the morning show.
This is the morning show. This morning I am joining Adanna for the morning show. You all know I am your GMT host. And this morning we have a special episode because we are chatting with the Chief Secretary on that Tobago Autonomy Bill. And now we know that that was not passed on Monday, and that was quite a sombering moment for many persons because, as Adanna said in the preamble, where do we go from here?
That's right.
That part of the conversation.
That's right. Because, I mean, we've been having this conversation from time immemorial. And as I mentioned, if you listen to the press conferences that the Chief Secretary held before and even after, he spoke about the persons that went ahead fighting for the same very thing that we had the opportunity to have passed on Monday. And here we are again. How relevant is this conversation going to be? Is it going to stay in the space 5, 10, 15, 20 more years? Do we have to keep fighting? But the good thing about it is that we have the Chief Secretary in studio with us this morning, and he is here to have the conversation, to answer the questions that you want to know the answers to, and of course, to take the discourse even further as to where do we go from here? Where are we now, in fact? And how do we move forward in terms of ensuring the autonomy for Tobago in the way that we want it to be, our space in Tobago to be defined, and for us as people of Tobago to be known internationally, and to have our rights as humans, as people of the Tobago space. Shenell, before we went to break,
I asked, did we fail to prepare? In that these amendments were made public on the morning of the bill going to Parliament. You know, for many of us, we saw this aid memoir going out, and it made us wonder, why wasn't this in the public space sometime before? So, you know, we're going to ask the Chief Secretary all of these things and get some responses, because as Tobagonians, this has been something at the top of the agenda for a long time. So where are we? And why haven't we been singing these songs a long time before to give us the proper leverage that we need in order to have had these amendments added to the bill?
So welcome, Chief Sec. Welcome this morning to our studio. And of course, we're starting hitting hard, right? And of course, we know that you are able to provide the answer. So let's get straight into the conversation this morning, you know?
Well, good morning to you. Good morning to Tobago. And thank you for having me this morning. Merry Christmas to everyone.
Thank you.
Tobago has been at this for a very long time. And Tobagonians, I believe, have been prepared, have been clamoring, have been asking for the same things for donkey years. As a matter of fact, long before the aid memoir, much earlier this year, at the start of this year, I sent through the clerk of the parliament in Trinidad. I know that was a fact because they were hand-delivered to the Red House. Hard copies for every single member of parliament that detailed what were in the current bills versus what was sent down to parliament by Mr. Orville London versus the things that Tobagonians have consistently said they wanted. So this has been a conversation happening for a long time. The bills, the signal that it will go before parliament only happened on Thursday last week. As a matter of fact, if we go before this year in 2021, when there was a pause primarily because of two reasons. On one hand, Mr. Chavez and myself, we said, look, these are some areas to be considered that you missed based on what Tobagonians said they wanted from the consultations. Come back to Tobagonians and talk to Tobagonians. There was a minority report coming out of the Joint Select Committee in 2021 that said that there wasn't sufficient consultations with the people of Tobago. Remember, it's the Parliament passing this. That Joint Select Committee between 2021 and now should have returned to Tobago to talk to rank and file everyday Tobagonians. That never happened. So because that never happened, I instituted a team that was led by Mr. Farley Chavez. And before he died, the last task he did as chair of that advisory council with himself, Ingrid Melville and Alan Richards, was to provide a broad matrix That is what I sent to all parliamentarians very early in this year. So when we realized that they were just going to debate the bill within 4 days, well, less than 4 days if it was placed on the order paper on Thursday, we sought to just come together again and say, look, let's make a last-ditch effort to communicate again. Because at the end of the day, from where we sit in Tobago, we don't have a voice in the parliament. Our 2 members of parliament are a waste of time in the parliament. They don't vocalize what the Tobagonians want. And so in an effort to have consideration given, and bear in mind that we really and truly have no legal right to make any amendments to the parliament. It doesn't even have to be considered because we are not elected members of the House of Representatives. But notwithstanding, I communicated with both the Prime Minister and the opposition leader using the fastest possible method. And I know some people ask, well, why use WhatsApp? Well, the Prime Minister has WhatsApped me important information before. And this is 2024. This is not 1800s. The modes of communication have changed. And if there are methods that allow for us to communicate much faster, then why not use those methods? But what is a travesty, I think, in all of this is the general approach of the parliament and parliamentarians. You know, I want Tobagonians to understand, and I'm a student of history, a very good student of history. And what most people probably don't know is that at sixth form Cambridge level, I was a top performing Tobago student in history. So I don't play about the historical facts. When Tobago was placed with Trinidad, 1888, 1889, the charter passed in 1888, signed off by Queen Victoria, I believe. 1889, it came into effect. Tobago did not have a say. We had the colonial masters in Westminster just sat in London and decide, we putting you with Trinidad, whether you agree or not, this is what we're doing for you. You have no say. So when we fast track to 2024, and the parliament adopts a position that says, I don't care what you think. I don't care how you feel. This is what I am doing. You better take it or leave it. It is abominable because now it's a neo-colonial approach. And what is sad is that it's not some white-faced Londoner who is making that decision, but it's a black-faced Trinbagonian a cabinet led by a Tobagonian birthed person. And as far as I'm concerned, that is a huge sellout of the Tobago ideal and a disregard for how Tobagonians feel.
Okay, so 2 things.
Yes.
The correspondence that you sent in the beginning, you said it hand-delivered, right?
So we hand-deliver them to the clerk of the House, to deliver them to all the members of the parliament.
And these were the recommendations for
these. What we did is that we created a matrix. We looked at all the different iterations of bills and what was sent down to Trinidad over the years. And then we pull out and say, look, these are the constant. These clearly are the non-negotiables. These are the things you ought to consider in making those amendments. I also want you to bear in mind that I have consistently said, unlike some of my other political colleagues, and even someone in my political team who have said outright, no, reject them. Let's be real. Earlier this year, when the committee that was set up by the Prime Minister, the Constitutional Committee, came to Tobago, post that, I saw a news report where Dr. Angus said no, reject the bills outright, where Dr. Vanna said no, what that Constitutional Committee is proposing contravenes the principle of democracy. I have been consistent in saying, don't throw away the process. Don't throw away what you have. Don't just say no. Let's amend what's there. And so in an effort to save the process, earlier this year, I went to the parliament with my security, with big boxes, with documents in envelopes labeled for every member of parliament and delivered them. How I know it was delivered? Because Independent Senator Dr. Remy Dillon met me afterwards and she said she received her package. So I know the clerk did the job of disseminating these packages to every member, because I wanted every member of parliament to look at the thing objectively and come up with those come up with those amendments. I wasn't necessarily planning to make the amendments myself, because that's the job of the parliamentarians. And so when it came up that they were going to put this debate over a short period of time, I said, look, just in case they didn't consider anything at all that was said over the last 3 years, just in case they didn't consider anything that was sent to the parliament over the last 3 years, let's do this and send it through to the parliament. And that's what that was. But not only that, if you go back to about 2018, when the Prime Minister set this thing in motion and he spoke to the parliament, the Prime Minister was clear that coming out of Tobago, there were 4 practical non-negotiables. Look for it. It was a statement read onto the Hansard records by the Prime Minister. And those 4 things the Prime Minister identified were: 1, equality of status between the 2 islands. And I am insisting that must be in the Constitution, not in a Tobago Island government bill that can be removed with a simple majority. 2, that there be a federal type system, not federation. I see the minority trying to say that I've asked for federation. No, the Prime Minister said a federal type system, because what Tobagonians have said they want and the kinds of powers that Tobagonians are seeking, what we will invariably end up with is a federal type system if that is to be granted. A third thing that Tobagonians ask for is that we are able to manage, to control, to have authority over all matters governing the lives of Tobagonians on the island of Tobago and within the space that is called Tobago, including our marine space. And that brings me to the 4th area identified by the Prime Minister, which is that there must be clear definition and delineation of the boundaries and the allowing for jurisdiction within those boundaries. And so if those 4 things that the Prime Minister himself correctly identified in his statement to the House when he set this in motion by putting a JSC to work, did not find their way in the final bills, it means that there was a massive disconnect, and it's not just a disconnect, there was a deliberate attempt to actually ignore the desires, the will of the people of Tobago, and that is abominable.
Right, and honestly, Chief, during your campaign, a major part of what your administration campaigned on was bringing home the Tobago Autonomy Bill. And we know that you had a very hectic portfolio to manage, in that you were the Secretary for Finance as well as Chief Secretary. But when persons saw that you gave up the finance portfolio as the Secretary for Finance, and in that when you came into office, you indicated that under the office of the Deputy Chief Secretary,
yes,
that office would be the office responsible for going to Trinidad, developing the Tobago House, and even fighting the fight for autonomy. So it was then expected that as you took on the portfolio of being the chief only, that the Tobago autonomy agenda would be...
When did that happen?
Very recently, this year, just a short...
As a matter of fact, I was Secretary of Finance up until June. I read the budget in June, passed the budget in June, and it was only after the House returned from recess in September that change happened. So you are correct. And I will be first to admit that we had a Deputy Chief Secretary who had that as a standalone portfolio, and when he should have been advocating for that, we're seeing videos with him cock up in bed in jockey shorts instead of doing the people work that was supposed to be done. So yes, that definitely led to some delays, and that did not allow for the delivery of the program as it should have. And that's why sometimes when you see people trying to have the most to say about this right to self-determination, you should ask them what they did when they were given an opportunity to lead and to do so. But here we are now, and there's a lot of blame to be passed all over. But here's the thing that I want us to remember. Tobagonians have been very consistent in saying what they want out of these bills.
And that therein lies the question.
So it is known. It's not known.
what level of consultation has taken place after the 2021 when the JSC was in Tobago?
And that's why,
To make claims of
that's why I made the point. The JSC, when the bill was paused, it was one of the reasons why it was paused is because the JSC needed to come back to Tobago to have wider consultations. Has the JSC ever returned to Tobago since? Has the JSC ever, did the JSC even meet since 2021? And the answer is no, it did not happen. And so the Parliament clearly did not see Tobago needs, and that is why I'm insistent that it is a neo-colonial approach that is being used. That's why I'm insistent that the approach that is being used is one that says, look, I know you want these things, but I don't care about what you want. This is what I want to give you, so you better accept this, and maybe sometime down the road we might get something more. That is the approach. And that cannot be the approach in a democracy.
You know, you talk about the documents. I want to follow up on the question I asked before, the documents that you submitted, and ensure that all persons got a copy of it.
Through the clerk of the House.
Right, and there's a confirmation that everybody got a copy of this. Was there any type of follow-up in terms of communication? Listen, I received this, or listen, I sent this to you. Where are we going from here? Let's have a conversation outside of the JSC and any other committee.
That one single member of Parliament did a follow-up. That one person who did that follow-up is Dr. Remy Dillon. And that follow-up went to the extent that Dr. Remy Dillon came, sat with the advisory council, with the same Mr. Charles, Alan Richards, Ingrid Melville, went through where we were at. The only one that came is Dr. Remy Dillon. And that's why when I lay blame at the Parliament, I'm laying blame across the floor, you know. Yes, I think there's a greater burden of blame to be placed on the government whose job it was to do this in a way in keeping what Tobagonians wanted, primarily because the head of the cabinet is supposed to be Tobagonian. But really and truly, if you look at it across the board, I don't know that the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago has ever honored what Tobagonians wanted. We were here in 2012, then Prime Minister and the People's Partnership, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, brought bills. And at that time, the Tobago House of Assembly encouraged the opposition to reject those bills. Why? Because of the same reason. Because the Parliament just keep refusing to accede to the democratic wishes of the people of Tobago. And that is why I am very comfortable, very, very comfortable making a reference point, creating parallels with how the colonial government in Westminster operates and how the Parliament operates. Because it cannot be that Tobagonians since 1977 have been saying the same things consistently. And here we are in 2024, and the Parliament is behaving as though, well, we don't know what they want, Tobagonians didn't tell me what they want. That is untrue. Let's not give them a pass. What Robinson brought is no different from what Tobagonians said they wanted, why they rejected Kamala's 2012 bills, and why these from Dr. Rowley today are also rejected. Tobago have been consistent during the period, and the Parliament just keep pleading the fifth as they just don't know what Tobago want. And that's untrue.
But Chief, is it safe to say that only Thursday the bill was to be brought before the Parliament on the order paper? Because from the parliamentarians that I've spoken to,
I'm telling you, it was placed
they said that it has been on the order paper for all year.
Listen, the process was saved. Before every debate, an order paper is produced for the upcoming debate. It was only placed on the order paper on Thursday for debate on Monday. We did not know a month ago they were going to debate it on Monday. We did not know 2 months ago that they were going to debate it on Monday. That was only known on Thursday last week, that they were going to debate it or go through the committee phase on Monday. That was not known before. A date was not given before. If the Prime Minister and the Cabinet wanted broad involvement and conversation, they could have said, okay, we are going to come in December on such and such date. This is our legislative agenda, and we are going to take it to the committee stage on that date. That was not done.
In terms of getting things on the order paper, what is the procedure? Is there a specific time span or time limit? Where is it normal to say, well, on Thursday, this is what's going to be happening Monday? Or is it like a week or 2 weeks? How do you know?
So for debates, we have to submit to the clerk of the House. That's our process in THA. We submit to the clerk of the House. We have to submit to the clerk of the House within a stipulated period before.
And what is the period?
We have to submit, let me see if I can remember clearly, we have to submit at least a working week before, right? And more than that, we also, the clerk will then issue that no less than 4 working days. So there's no way, for example, our clerk will issue an order paper Thursday for Monday. We go minimum 4 working days for which the order paper is issued to members. So we will have a debate coming up in the month of December. We have already started communicating with the clerk about the possible days. We will possibly in December have that sitting well in advance of the 4th Thursday, because the 4th Thursday might take us, I think, to Boxing Day, which is a public holiday. It is required by law that we meet at least once per month. So more than likely we will have the sitting before that particular Thursday. So we have already started the communication of the clerk of the House. And the clerk of the House will produce an order paper which will be given to members no less than 4 days in advance of the actual sitting. Except it's a special sitting. And for a special sitting, which I don't think this was, for a special sitting, it will be the Chief Secretary and, of course, the support of no less than, I think, 8 members will mandate that the House sit, and it must be something that is extremely urgent, that requires that special meeting of the House. Usually, it might be a statement or something that just can't wait, that is an emergency. But I'm saying, notwithstanding all of that, the JSC places on pause since 2021. Before the last THA elections, it was placed on pause.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are speaking with the Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly, the Honourable Farley Chavez Augustine. Of course, we're talking about autonomy for Tobago, what transpired on Monday, where we are, and when we come back from the break, we'll be talking about where do we go from here. You want to be a part of the conversation, so ensure that you are following us on our Facebook live stream, on our YouTube channel, and on Amplia 102. Leave your comments so we know your point of view where this is concerned. We have to go for a short break, and in the meantime, we invite you to help us. Share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be right back.
Good morning, morning, good morning, morning.
Good morning, and welcome back to the morning show here on Tobago Updates. I am joined by my co-host Adanna Combie, and we have the privilege of sitting in studio this morning and discussing that Tobago Autonomy Bill, where we are now and where we're going. What's the next steps for Tobago? And we are sitting and chatting with the Honourable Chief Secretary Farley Chavez Augustine. Now, this is a momentous time in Tobago, regardless of the fact that the bill was not passed, because it's a time where unity is important. It's a time where Tobagonians need to stand and allow their voices to be heard, and also echo the sentiments that although it was not passed, this is not the end of the conversation. As a matter of fact, this is the beginning of the conversation for where we want to go, because as many persons have said, we are not going to sit by and allow our children and our children's children to still be having the autonomy conversation. But Chief Secretary Augustine, you submitted an aid memoir on Monday morning. And within that aid memoir were a number of legal jargon that were hinted towards the recommended amendments for the bill. But at the end of the documents, you said something that seemed a bit counterproductive to the document itself. You said, do not proceed with the bill. as is.
Right.
That was quite
explain.
confusing.
Right.
And
so
I guess this is why the opposition would have, or the minority said that the document was used to obstruct.
Even minority is saying that means that they are functionally illiterate and they do not read, right? When you look at the document, on the last section of the document, you see Tobago Island Government Bill 2021. That's the section. So the only section we recommended not to proceed with was the Tobago Island Government Bill, for which the JC never consulted the people of Tobago. Therefore, what we propose should happen is that we make the changes to the Constitutional Amendment Bill and then set the Tobago House of Assembly and the people in motion for a period of about 9 months to actually consult and to actually set up our own structure of government in Tobago. Now remember, the Tobago Island Government Bill was intended to determine what the THA will look like, what the structure will look like. That is problematic. It's problematic because anytime something doesn't work there, we have to now go back to the parliament in Trinidad to get it fixed. So we were saying, and you're right, you have a lot of legal jargon because we brought lawyers in to do it. So instead of having to do that, we are saying, give Tobago its broad right to self-determination, which really means the people of the Tobago deciding for themselves how they want to be governed and what the structure will be, and allow the government in Tobago to build out the structure of the THA instead of trying to do it in the parliament. So the only portion that we asked not to proceed with was the Tobago Island Government Bill. But the Constitutional Amendment Bill, we made very important recommendations for amendments so that the people of Tobago ultimately could say, we set up our own government. We decide how we want it to function. We decide whether we feel to call with chief sec or premier. We decide whether we're going to keep 15 seats or that going to change or what structure that will be. Noted when we had the tie, the 6-6, there was no instrument on island in the government of the THA for us to fix it. None. What had to happen? It had to go to parliament after some months. Well, after a year almost for it to be fixed. Because election was in January and it went to parliament and we had a re-election in December. Almost a whole year for it to be fixed. That will always happen, and it may not be a tie. It may be some other issue. Once the structure of the government is codified in law and passed at the Red House, it means the Red House is only where it can be changed. And that is actually counterproductive to the concept, to the idea of self-determination. Self-determination means we make the changes in the Constitution and then give the people of Tobago the right. Let the Tobago people go to the polls and vote and decide, I like how you plan to structure the government better than you, and I vote for you, and you set up the government as the House. And so over time, as the thing evolves, the Tobago Island government itself can evolve and keep changing the structure to meet modern demands without having to go back to Trinidad to get it. That is self-determination at work. Or anything other than that, it means that somebody determining for us how we ought to structure our government.
But Adanna, this one, if the bill was passed, would it have triggered an immediate THA election? Because the chief is asking for 9 months to do consultation, but would it have triggered an immediate
not
election?
necessarily. And I hear some people saying that the courts have been consistent, the last being the case with local government, that said that the parliament cannot, for any reason, alter the terms or the period for which somebody was elected into office. When it happened to break the 6-6 deadlock, then the law of necessity kicked in because there was no other way to fix it. But remember when the government wanted, for example, to extend the period for local government, the Privy Council said, you don't have such a right. Only the people decides that. But I want to make it clear. If they gave us what we wanted, I was prepared to go to the House, the Tobago House of Assembly, and move a motion to ask at the appropriate time to ask that the House be dissolved for an election. I have no issue with doing that because that's the only way a THA election can be called. As a matter of fact, let me be clear. Unlike in the case of the Prime Minister and the central government, Tobago has sort of a fixed term limit. Not a fixed term, but a fixed election period. Meaning that I as Chief Secretary can't dissolve the House. No member could dissolve the House. The Parliament in Trinidad can't just dissolve the House. That can only happen by members going to the House and voting to dissolve the House. So had this passed, there was only one legal way to go back to the post for an election. That's the THA going to the House and dissolving itself. But I'm saying if that was necessary and if that would have been the best approach, I would have no problem saying to my team, let's go back to the polls. Let Tobagonians decide between PNM and TPP who have the better plan for structure of the government, and then we move from there. Because that's the right to self-determination. And certainly, I wouldn't want additional powers or new powers applied to this Tobago House of Assembly, where people voted expecting Act 40 of 1996. So I am very pro-democracy. And that's why I am irate at the very undemocratic approach by the central government to the Tobago Island Government Bill and saying, this is what we're giving you, take it or leave it.
And talking about that, had the bill for the amendments been passed, in the constitutional amendment bill passed with what they presented, what would have been our position? Because I know there were recommendations from the Tobago House of Assembly that must be included, including the 4 non-negotiables you mentioned about the previous Chief Secretary of the London submitted as well. What the amendments presented did not include those things. Let's say, for instance, it passed.
Well,
what would have been our position here?
If it had passed, it means that the next incarnation of the Tobago House of Assembly would have to operate under that which was passed. It will mean that there might be some areas for which we have some authority under Act 40 of 1996 that will no longer exist in the new Tobago House of Assembly, new Tobago Island government.
Does it mean that we would not have been in a better place, or how does it rank? I want the people to understand where we would have...
No, we would not have been in a better place. As a matter of fact, one of the things, and I think we should go back and look at the records that Honorable Chavez have been consistent in saying. He has been consistent in saying, if we're not going to do it right, leave Act 40 of 1996 as it is. He has been consistent in saying that. Because what you don't want is to interfere with it and bring something that is less than. Less than cannot be acceptable. And I'll give you an example of how interfering with it cavalierly or carelessly could lead to problems. When we had 12 seats, the quorum for the House was 9. 9 members must be present for you to have a quorum for sitting. The number of seats were changed to 15, but the quorum was not changed. Because nobody cared to pay attention, and part of the problem is that a significant portion of the national community does not care to really understand and appreciate and know Act 40 of 1996, including members of parliament at the central government, on both sides, on all sides. And I want to be very clear, loudly clear, in saying that this is not just a problem that Tobago is having with the PNM. It's a problem Tobago had with the UNC when they were in charge as well. So it has almost been consistent that the central government just doesn't want to give the people of Tobago this right to self-determination.
How would having Tobago-centric or Tobago-focused as opposed to politically minded individuals in the parliament representing Tobago East and West change the conversation or continue the conversation?
I'm glad you asked that, and I had to leave just now because I had to open the People Logos boat, which in the port. But let me explain the historical antecedent to where we're at. 1977, Tobago rejected PNM and voted for 2 standalone candidates in Robinson and Murray. They were backbenchers in a parliament for which they were in the complete minority. They weren't even members of the opposition party in in Port of Spain. That is what gave us Act 37 of 1980. 1996, Tobago again voted for two people who were minority in the entire parliament, Robinson and Pamela Nicholson, in the 1717 too. That's how we got Act 40 of 1996. And I said to my party up to yesterday, because we had a massive internal meeting yesterday, and I said to them, as I have been saying to them, I really don't care for us sending people to be in cabinet, you know, because when things in cabinet, they don't really function. The cabinet I accustomed to is the one that my granny have, and I couldn't even use the teacup inside it. I just had to look at it. They so pretty in a cabinet, had no real use. You have to just watch it. I'm not interested in sending people to Trinidad to be in a cabinet. I'm interested in sending people to Trinidad who will be standalone members of parliament, as Robinson and Murray were, and who will advocate for Tobago, and who will leverage Tobago's 2 seats for negotiation. Imagine for a moment if our 2 members of parliament decide that they will stand alone and stand with Tobago on this issue, and not stand with their party unless their party give Tobago what Tobago wants. It will mean that the government will have to negotiate and say, look, I got to get this because I needed to vote for us to pass some things. Because it will be in 1922. Tobago's power is in standing alone. And that's why I'm not interested in joining up with nobody. I'm interested. I think Patrick Manning once said it, I'll win alone and I'll lose alone. Right? But I think Tobago always wins when we stand alone.
Of course, I know we're pressed for time now, you have to run off, but in closing, we are here. Where do we go from here in terms of how do we continue this conversation, this fight? How do we continue to empower our people here on the island of Tobago in terms of consultations, conversations, aggressively pursuing the autonomy for Tobago and ensuring that in your lifetime, as you mentioned, that we will see the autonomy that we're looking for on the island of Tobago, especially be the captain of the ship right now in the Tobago House of Assembly, moving this conversation forward.
My task and Tobago's task for the next step is electing 2 sensible people to go down to the national parliament. The thing now starting. Our task is to make sure we get rid of that party that doesn't care for the way we think and feel and believe in Tobago, who doesn't care about the cultural differences in Tobago. And let me be clear, Tobago is not culturally like Trinidad. I don't care for the race politics in Trinidad. I don't care for the tribal politics in Trinidad. Let them do what they want with each other down there. That's not my business at all. But you see, in Tobago here, with our 2 seats, it's the only 2 we have in a parliament of 41. Those 2 seats are critical in moving us to the next step. Those two seats are critical in pushing the government, whoever the next government will be, to pass something that is greater and better than Act 40 of 1996. And even if we send 2 down there, and there isn't a constitutional majority supporting what we propose, we certainly can pass a Tobago Island government bill that gives us superior leverage to what we have in Act 40 of 1996. And I want to say this by way of example. In 2012, we were told to reject Kamla's bill. I agreed. And I want Tobagonians to understand. Read between the lines. I agreed that those bills, Kamla bill did not fully reflect what Tobagonians wanted. Kamla was offering us 8% in that bill. Today, the same people who convinced us to reject that, telling us 6.9 is best for you. That's good enough for you. And then they expect us to sit down and clap and say, yeah, you really love we so. That is nothing more than a very abusive mate who like to just dangle little trinkets, cheap trinkets that you buy in a flea market and hope that that will buy our love for the set of beating and flogging that you give us. A general election will come, and Tobagonians will have the chance to flog their slave masters. Tobagonians will have the chance to reawaken that spirit of Sandy and to deal with the neo-colonial slave masters in Port of Spain who want to control how Tobago is governed, who governs Tobago, and how the economy of Tobago should grow and how fast it should go. Tobago will have its chance, and I'm certain I will have a whole lot more opportunity to talk to Tobagonians, because trust me, I was very peaceful until now. But the Bible says for everything there is a season under the sun. And one of the things the Bible says that there must be a season for is that there must be a season for war. Thank you very much for accommodating me this morning.
Thank you very much, Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly, the Honourable Farley Chavez Augustine, for coming into studio this morning and, of course, going through the paces in terms of where we are about the Tobago autonomy. Of course, you know that the bills were presented on Monday in the Parliament, and this is where we are right now. The final question posed to the Chief Secretary is, where do we go from here? How do we continue the conversation? How do we continue the fight? And how do we ensure autonomy for Tobago? And his response being ensuring we have two capable candidates for the Tobago East and West seats for the general elections. And we do hope, of course, that the conversation will continue. And I want to implore all of Tobago, Shenell, any person residing in Tobago, you have any business in Tobago, interest in Tobago, your family members are from Tobago, get an understanding of what it truly means to have autonomy for the island of Tobago. Get an understanding as to what it means for us, the benefits that can be derived from it, the rights that we will have in terms of lawmaking and all the other things, benefits that come with the autonomy. Get acquainted with it. In fact, read the bills that are there now. Read the amendments. Read everything that you can read on the autonomy for Tobago and be a part of the conversation. Whatever happens at the end of the day impacts my life, it impacts your life, and generations to come. So we all want to be a part of that conversation. Let us not let it die here today. This is not the end. We've been fighting for this since the 70s, and we're going to continue the fight up until we get what we are looking for here on the island of Tobago to define who we are as Tobago people. This is where we end the morning show here on Tobago Updates Television, and we thank you so much for staying with us throughout the entire program and leaving your comments on our live stream. We saw all of them and we appreciate your input, and we will continue the conversation as we get to where we want to be for autonomy for Tobago. I am Adanna Combie, and with me is Shenell Felix, and again we say thank you to the Honourable Chief Secretary Farley Chavez Augustine. This is where we end. Do have a pleasant day. Welcome back to the morning show here on Tobago Updates Television. This morning is a special edition of the morning show. I know you're used to seeing the youths on Youth Wednesday, and of course, again, we must say thank you to the young people for allowing us this opportunity to run the program this morning. We continue conversations in studio with our Chief Secretary of Tobago House of Assembly, the Honourable Farley Chavez Augustine, and we're talking about autonomy for Tobago. As you are aware, if you reside in Tobago, have business in Tobago, concerns about Tobago, or even in the diaspora, anything relating to Tobago, you will know that discussions about Tobago autonomy is still very, very relevant. And of course, the bill did not pass in Parliament, and we are having the discussions now as to why are we at this point? Where do we go from here? Chief, we've been hearing, of course, the PNM, they are saying that the work is going down the drain. All this work is down the drain because, of course, the bill, the Constitution Amendment was not passed in the Parliament. To say that all the work is going down the drain, does that mean that this is the end? It cannot be that this is the end. Well, where do we go? What does this actually mean?
But this will never be the end. In 1979, when Simongal draft recognized the right to self-determination and PNM rejected it, the work did not end. We continued at it until we got Act 40 of 1996. And as a matter of fact, I'm not sure what all work they're talking about. And one of the things I failed to mention is that the Joint Select Committee never consulted on the Tobago Island Government Bill. They consulted on the Constitutional Amendment Bill. So that which they passed yesterday, they never consulted on that. What was not passed was the one that they actually had some consultation on. And that's why I am insistent that between 2021 and now, when they put a pause on this, the Joint Select Committee of Parliament needed to return to Tobago. At the end of the day, they are the parliamentarians that have to take this and pass this. That's not the job of the THA. That was their job, which they neglected, which they failed, which they refused to do over the last 3 years, and then come last minute and say, look, take it or leave it. The work cannot be done. And as a matter of fact, if you looked at A.N.R. Robinson's speech in 1977, one of the things he said is that the longer the central government takes to accord unto the people of Tobago this right to self-determination, is the more Tobagonians will essentially become radicalized about this position. It will never die. And I have said it, I have a very centrist approach to the matter. But I'm afraid the generation after me will be less patient, less kind, less polite, and certainly will possibly argue for us to just leave the union that's Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm saying if this generation does not do it, the next generation might essentially destroy the union that's Trinidad and Tobago. It will not die. I have made the case that if the central government refuses to do what is necessary, insofar as giving the people of Tobago that right to self-determination, which is considered a human right, something that we signed on to as a country, then Tobago is left with no choice than to go to the international community and to lodge a formal complaint against the country and the government of the country that is mistreating a section of its population.
No, that would be very unfortunate if we have to get to that stage.
No, Tobago will do what it must to get its right to self-determination. It is our right. We don't care about how others feel about that. We have to see about what is our right.
And yes, while you were talking about the generation coming up might be a bit more radical in terms of, one thing came to mind is the Belmana riots. When Tobago people just wasn't sitting there and taking that.
That was actually one of the triggers.
That's right.
That gave the colonial masters in London an excuse to destroy Tobago. And I want you to understand, the colonial masters wanted to destroy this autonomous assembly that existed on the island of Tobago and bring it under crown colony rule, meaning that they wanted from London to direct what happened in Tobago. Prior to 1888, 1889, Tobago was pretty autonomous, having its own systems of governance, including judicial systems and a chief justice and all of those things. And they wanted to destroy that and ensure we become well-behaved colonials. I know Tobagonians by nature, we don't behave well for our colonial masters. And so when the Belmana riots happen, they say, oh, you see, you can't manage your own thing. We have to send for some Barbados to quell the thing. Or you're killing police officer, all kind of thing. Or you can't behave, go and become a ward of Trinidad. And then they say, become a ward of Trinidad and Tobago. And since then, Tobagonians as have been saying, but give us this right to self-determination. As a matter of fact, Tobagonians didn't want to be joined to Trinidad. Trinidadians didn't want us to be joined to Trinidad. Have you ever wondered why, as a country, we never celebrated as a public holiday the joining of Trinidad and Tobago? Have you ever wondered why every year comes and nobody even remembers as a memorial the date that we were joined together as a twin island republic? And that's because the genesis, the historical antecedent of this wasn't one whereby people on either island wanted the coming together. I am of the considered position that we are here now. We have made this journey as an independent country since 1962. And I'm saying that by right, the people of Tobago within the construct that is Trinidad and Tobago, the people of Tobago should have that right to self-determination, which simply means we have a right to decide on the form, the structure, the who that governs the island, because we have considerable needs that are often overlooked in the national conversation. And there's one that I will always call to bear on this conversation. So they passed the Tobago Island Government Bill, and they were seeking, for example, to enshrine into the Constitution as one of the schedule a schedule of areas that we could pass laws over. And when I look through that schedule never considered for a moment the need for Tobago to be able to pass laws to govern the blue economy or its marine space. So while in one of the amendments that they carried on the floor yesterday sought to give some definition of the jurisdiction of Tobago, when you look at what we will be able to actually pass laws over, one of the areas glaringly absent is that of the marine space. Now, when we go back to 2021, the last thing Mr. Dennis did as Chief Secretary was to bring a bill to send down to Parliament, asking the Parliament to give us some authority so that we could create policy and more or less monitor and police those policies over marine parks in Tobago. That was 2021 November. Guess what? It never made its way on the Parliament floor. And you are telling me you want to now give us this new creature, this Tobago Island government, and we will still need to go down to Trinidad if I want to create a marine park in Speyside so that I could send scientists up there to combat the coral bleaching that's happening there. I will still need to go to Trinidad to get their permission to be able to do that in Tobago. Tell me, under how could that even be conscionable? How could that even be acceptable? And as far as I'm concerned, the PNM minority in Tobago, who is walking about with the most loud mouth, who keeping so-called consultations, they are nothing but sellouts of the Tobago dream, because they really and truly don't believe in Tobagonians having that right to govern themselves. Tell me why a parliament in Trinidad wants to control whether or not we could pass a law over creating a marine park in the Tobago.
I'm glad that you mentioned.
Tell me why. But I know why, because part of it might be the whole conversation about energy, which is also glaringly absent, which means that as an island government, we can't even explore possibilities in where energy is concerned. It means as an island government, if what they wanted to pass was passed, we can't decide, okay, we're going to go out in the Atlantic and put down some windmills and use wind energy, because they think that the way Tobago ought to be governed is that we must always be crawling on our knees to them. But more than that, and I shared a clip on Monday morning, from former Chief Secretary Mr. Orville London, going through why it is so important for us to look at the wide marine space in Tobago, and he made a salient point. Every year we go to the National Parliament making noise about the money question and how much is given to us, but nobody considers for a moment what we actually contribute to the national coffers, and the fact that there are hydrocarbons being extracted from our waters, and so that is going into the national coffers. Nobody counts that. As a matter of fact, in 2021, when the THA election campaign was ongoing, the Prime Minister came up here and said, well, Tobago does only contribute about 250 million in taxes, which is not true. Which, if you consider the full economic space, that's untrue. But that's because they want us to be seen as beggars, always begging from the national coffers and not contributing to the national coffers. And I'm saying you have to empower the Tobagonian to be able to manage its own socio-cultural and economic space. Tobagonians didn't even ask for border patrol to be in charge of Coast Guard. Tobago just asked for internal security within the constructs of the island government. Tobago didn't even say we want to get full control over international relations. Tobago simply says when it's a matter concerning Tobago, we want concurrence. We want to have a conversation. We want to be part of it. Because what has happened in the past, we sitting down in Tobago, our fishermen cussing left, right, and center, saying that it are fishermen from other islands and other territories utilizing and exploiting our resources. And then a prime minister, two different occasions, two different prime ministers, Rongo Barbados, signing whatever they're signing, making arrangements, but nobody even bringing Tobagonians into the conversation.
No, I'm glad that you mentioned that, Chief, because prior to this administration being in office, we know that the THA formally made recommendations for a number of Tobagonians to sit on key state enterprises, state boards. And now we are hearing that with this dispensation, the Minister of Finance is saying to the THA now that that was a courtesy that we did to the THA by allowing them to make recommendations for these state enterprises, and that is not something that would be extended to this administration. Now, I want you to speak to that. But in addition to that, because we are pressed for time, I want to also squeeze the question in there, because you said that the current PNM representatives in the parliament for Tobago are sellouts, but you also made a statement that rub a number of persons the wrong way. You referred to the prime minister as being a house slave, and with the history of slavery among our people, you know, especially in the kind of racial and ethnic dynamic that happens in Trinidad and Tobago, a number of persons would have said that that was disrespectful on your part, and it could have come across differently. How do you respond to that?
Let me respond to the two things. The Minister of Finance, as corporation sole, will only ask the Tobago House of Assembly to submit names to state boards for which there is a law or a statutory requirement for the THA to have a representative. Once that doesn't exist, the courtesy isn't extended. So, for example, the courtesy wasn't extended to us for Caribbean Airlines Board. Very important for the function of Tobago. The courtesy wasn't extended to us for the Central Bank Board. Just another example. So, although they may consider Tobagonians, they don't consider the THA in that regard, and it speaks to how this central government has treated us. I could extend it. CRIF sent money for Tobago for Hurricane Beryl. I still have people cussing me because they need some galvanized, they need retaining walls and so forth. You know what the Minister of Finance did? They refused to send it to Tobago. Although Hurricane Beryl did nothing to Trinidad, they refused to send it to us. ITOF. We're trying to negotiate. We are not part of that conversation because they don't see us. And I'm saying, if I have members of parliament representing me, they ought to be saying to the cabinet, you can't go to ITOF and Mr. Alan Stewart from TIMA, not in your team, going to ITOF to make the case, because he was the one who led the cleanup of the oil spill. That is disrespectful to the people of Tobago. That is a disregard for our human right. And let me say this, as a student of history, I understand very well the psychology of a house slave. You see, there were two primary types of slave in a plantation economy. You have those in the master's house and those in the field. Those in the master's house, because they were closer and more intimate with the masters, they felt somehow that they were of a higher class. And so right in the plantation economy, developed a sort of a substrata of a kind of black bourgeoisie that thought, okay, because I eat from the master's table, it comes from the master's table, because they're not eating at the master's table, because I'm in the house, because I get to raise the master's child, because I get to eat from the crumbs at the master's table, somehow I could disregard the plight of those of us left out there in the field. Here we are in 2024, Tobago being perhaps the smallest subsect of the country that's Trinidad and Tobago by population size, having delivered to this country our second prime minister, perhaps providing more prime ministers per capita than any other section of the country. We have a situation whereby a cabinet adopts a position that I do not care what you want. I am going to treat this matter of Tobago autonomy in the same way, in an identical way to that which the white colonial masters treated with your autonomy. And that is what is abominable, because the children, the descendants of slaves, ought to never repeat the actions of slaves. And one thing about a Tobagonian, more so a Tobagonian from up in the country and Tobago East, is that we speak truth to power. We say what the truth is. Truth is naked. Truth is not always polite. Truth is not always comfortable, but the truth must be said. And I said the truth. End of story. I really could care less who vex, who are hard feelings, whatever. It does not bother me whatsoever. And I'll go further to say, we have a prime minister who is the most abusive with language, and we have a bunch of hypocrites running around who I did not see make a single post when their colleague was in parliament letting go bad word and being obscene left, right and center on microphone in the parliament without decorum. I see not a post from them, but I see the same hypocrites running about now, behaving as though they are God sent. But God hates hypocrites. God likes people who tells the truth. So I spoke the truth, end of story. Really could care less how people feel.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with the Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly, the Honourable Farley Chavez Augustine. We're talking all things autonomy here for the island of Tobago. Of course, you know what took place on Monday, and we have to go for a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what was actually presented as amendments to the bill, and of course, where do we go from here? The Chief Secretary himself said that the fight cannot end. How do we continue this fight is the question that we will ask when we come back from the break. In the meantime, help us to share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be right back.